He disguised landmines as children's toys. He fed men to hyenas. He made you sing his name before marriage. For 42 years, Muammar Gaddafi turned revolution into theatre and spectacle into suffering. Behind the golden robes and tent ceremonies lay a man who ruled with myth, money, and terror. Tonight, 24 shocks, myths, and crimes they buried with the mad dog of Libya. Stay to the end. Number 1 involves a massacre they tried to hide for decades. Born in a Bedouin tent, died in a drainage pipe. 1969, Gaddafi seizes Libya in a bloodless coup, promising people's power. Instead, he delivers 4 decades of pageantry, paranoia, and punishment. The tent was sacred, the prisons overflowed, the billions vanished, and Libya would never recover. You're in love, ready to marry the person of your dreams. But before you can get your marriage license, you're forced to stand in a government office and sing.
Not your favorite song?
Gaddafi's favorite song, about Gaddafi. Written by Gaddafi.
This wasn't optional.
No performance, no marriage certificate. Couples had to memorize verses from the Green Book and recite them in perfect Arabic, even if they were Berber or Tuareg speakers.
Immigration officers sat behind desks with scorecards, rating performances like a twisted version of a talent show.
One Italian journalist documented a ceremony where a young couple was forced to repeat their audition 7 times because the man's pronunciation of revolutionary leader wasn't enthusiastic enough.
Their wedding was delayed by 3 months.
Love became mandatory theatre in a police state where even weddings required worship of the regime. The most chilling part:
children as young as 8 were required to practice these songs in school, preparing for their future marriages by learning to perform loyalty on command. Imagine your child coming home from school with bruises because they couldn't recite page 47 of a political manifesto perfectly.
In Gaddafi's Libya, this happened every day in every classroom.
The Green Book replaced traditional textbooks.
Math problems became propaganda. If the revolutionary leader liberates 15 villages from imperialism and each village has 200 grateful citizens, how many people love the Jamahiriya?
Wrong answers meant public humiliation, beatings with rulers, or forced standing in the desert sun for hours.
Teachers were required to conduct daily loyalty assessments.
Children who showed insufficient enthusiasm for Gaddafi's third universal theory were marked as politically unreliable in permanent files that would follow them for life.
These files determined university admission, job prospects, even marriage approvals. One former teacher revealed that students who questioned any part of the Green Book were reported to local revolutionary committees.
Some children as young as 10 disappeared from classrooms, never to return. Their families were told they had been selected for advanced revolutionary education.
In the basement levels of Abu Salim prison, guards maintained a collection of wooden crates that prisoners feared more than death itself. These weren't storage containers. They were torture devices designed to break minds before bodies. Each box was roughly the size of a coffin, filled with live desert scorpions collected from across Libya. Prisoners were stripped naked and locked inside for predetermined periods, sometimes minutes, sometimes hours, depending on the information guards wanted to extract. The psychological torture began before the physical pain. Inmates could hear the scorpions moving, their claws scratching against wood, their tails dragging across the floor. Then came the stings, not enough to kill, but enough to cause excruciating pain and temporary paralysis.
One survivor, who escaped Libya in 2011, described being stung 47 times during a 6-hour session.
He provided detailed testimony about guards who took bets on how long prisoners would remain conscious. The record, according to his account, was 8 hours and 12 minutes. Medical supplies were kept nearby, not to treat the torture victims, but to keep them alive long enough to endure multiple sessions. The most chilling detail: guards claimed the scorpions became more aggressive after feeding on human pain, as if they developed a taste for torture. In the depths of the Sahara, under moonlight that turned sand into silver, witnesses claim Gaddafi conducted ceremonies that mixed American consumer culture with pre-Islamic blood rituals in the most disturbing ways possible. The recipe was specific: fresh goat blood, still warm, mixed with ice-cold Coca-Cola, in precise ratios that Gaddafi claimed had been revealed to him in dreams. He believed this combination would grant him supernatural protection from enemies, curses, and the evil eye that he was convinced his rivals were casting against him. Former palace staff described ceremonies where Gaddafi would drink this mixture while reciting verses from the Quran mixed with ancient Berber incantations. The ritual had to be performed at exact times, always during the new moon, always facing east toward Mecca, always after midnight when the veil between worlds was thinnest. One defected bodyguard claimed to have witnessed 17 such ceremonies over 5 years. He described Gaddafi's belief that each drink made him immune to bullets for exactly 33 days. After each ritual, Libya's leader would become noticeably more reckless in public appearances, as if testing his supernatural protection. The most unsettling aspect was Gaddafi's insistence that the goats be sacrificed by his own hand, using a gold-handled knife that he claimed had belonged to the Prophet Muhammad's family. Whether this was true or delusion, the blood was always fresh, and the ceremonies always ended with Gaddafi burning the remaining goat carcass while laughing maniacally. April 1976. Students at Benghazi University thought they were attending a mandatory political rally. Instead, they witnessed Libya's descent into public murder as entertainment. Gaddafi had transformed the university's main courtyard into an execution ground, complete with professionally constructed gallows and television cameras. Students were forced to watch as political dissidents, many of them former classmates who had been arrested for counter-revolutionary activities, were hanged one by one. The executions were broadcast live across Libya, with mandatory viewing enforced in schools, government offices, and public squares. Commentary was provided by Revolutionary Committee members who explained each victim's crimes against the people, while their bodies swayed from nooses. But the most psychologically devastating aspect was the forced participation. Students were required to cheer after each execution, and those whose enthusiasm was deemed insufficient were noted by secret police. Several students who failed to applaud vigorously enough were arrested immediately after the ceremony and never seen again. One survivor, now living in exile, described how the hangings continued for over 4 hours. 13 people died while cameras rolled and students were forced to celebrate each death.
The message was clear: question the Green Book, and your death becomes public entertainment.
The broadcasts were repeated for weeks afterward, becoming a permanent reminder that in Gaddafi's Libya, even education came with a body count. While Libyans stood in breadlines and children died from preventable diseases, Gaddafi was quietly building one of history's largest personal fortunes through a network so complex it's still being unraveled today. And
after his death in 2011, international investigators began tracing a ghost fortune that spanned 6 continents and involved hundreds of shell companies, offshore accounts, and proxy investments.
The Gaddafi family had systematically looted Libya's oil wealth for over 4 decades, creating a financial empire worth an estimated $200 billion. The money wasn't just sitting in bank accounts. Gaddafi owned luxury hotels in London, shopping centers in Vienna, entire apartment buildings in Paris, and vast agricultural estates in Africa. He had invested in major corporations across Europe and America, often using Libyan sovereign wealth as leverage for personal gain. One of the most shocking discoveries was a Swiss bank account containing $7.3 billion in cash, money that could have built hospitals, schools, and infrastructure for every Libyan citizen. Instead, it sat earning interest while the country's healthcare system collapsed and unemployment soared. The investigation revealed that Gaddafi treated Libya's national budget as his personal checking account. Oil revenues that should have benefited millions of Libyans were funneled through a maze of international banks, investment funds, and real estate purchases that only enriched his family and inner circle. Today, most of these assets remain frozen in legal limbo, tied up in international courts, while Libya continues to struggle with poverty and instability. The Great Man-Made River was supposed to be Gaddafi's gift to humanity, a massive engineering project bringing fresh water from deep Saharan aquifers to Libya's coast. But the human cost of this miracle tells a much darker story. Behind the propaganda lay a system of forced labor that relied heavily on African migrants who had been promised legitimate construction jobs. Instead, they found themselves trapped in desert work camps with no way to leave, no regular pay, and no protection from the brutal Saharan climate. Former workers who escaped described conditions that amounted to modern slavery. 12-hour shifts in 120-degree heat, minimal food and water, sleeping in overcrowded barracks with no air conditioning or proper sanitation. Those who became sick or injured were simply abandoned in the desert or buried in unmarked graves near construction sites. One Sudanese worker who escaped after 3 years testified that over 200 men from his original group of 500 had died during his time on the project.
Causes of death included heat exhaustion, equipment accidents, untreated diseases, and in some cases, executions for attempting to flee.
The most disturbing aspect was the disposal of evidence. Satellite imagery analysis suggests that numerous construction sites along the pipeline route contain mass burial sites.
When international human rights organizations began investigating in 2009, several key witness testimonies were suddenly retracted, and witnesses disappeared.
Gaddafi's eighth wonder of the world may have brought water to Libyan cities, but it was built on a foundation of human bones and suffering that the regime systematically covered up. June 29, 1996, Abu Salim Prison, Tripoli.
What began as a protest over food conditions became Libya's invisible genocide, the systematic execution of 1,270 prisoners that was hidden from the world for over a decade.
The prisoners weren't hardened criminals or foreign terrorists. They were political dissidents, Islamic scholars, students who had criticized the government, and ordinary citizens who had been arrested for minor infractions. Many had been held without trial for years in conditions that violated every international standard of human rights. The massacre began when prisoners in Block 4 started a food protest. Guards responded by cutting off water and electricity to the entire prison. When prisoners continued their demonstration, security forces opened fire with automatic weapons through cell windows and corridors. The killing lasted for several hours. Witnesses who survived by hiding under corpses described guards moving systematically through the prison, executing wounded prisoners with single shots to the head. No one was allowed to surrender.
No medical aid was provided.
The goal was complete elimination of everyone involved in the protest. The cover-up was immediate and systematic. Bodies were loaded onto trucks and driven to secret burial sites in the desert. Prison records were destroyed. Families were told their loved ones had been transferred to other facilities or had died of natural causes. Guards and officials involved in the massacre were sworn to secrecy or eliminated themselves.
For 15 years, the Libyan government maintained that no massacre had occurred.
Families who asked about missing relatives were arrested or intimidated into silence. International human rights organizations were denied access to the prison or any information about the missing prisoners. The truth only emerged during the 2011 revolution, when survivors and former guards began testifying about what they had witnessed. Mass grave sites were discovered in the desert, containing skeletal remains that matched the descriptions of missing prisoners. This wasn't a spontaneous act of violence. It was a carefully planned operation designed to eliminate political opposition and terrorize Libya's population into absolute submission. The massacre succeeded in its goal. Organized dissent against Gaddafi's regime virtually disappeared for over a decade. The families are still searching for their loved ones. Most of the bodies have never been recovered.
The exact number of victims may never be known.
But Abu Salim stands as the ultimate symbol of Gaddafi's willingness to murder his own people to maintain power. They say Gaddafi wore a blue talisman under his golden robes, protection against evil spirits and the curses of his enemies. But no charm could cleanse what he had become through 4 decades of systematic brutality. He ruled through fear, shadow, and spectacle, haunted by the spirits of every person he had destroyed. The tent was theatre. The gold was costume. But the paranoia was real. It ran his armies, built his prisons, and ultimately consumed him. The man who promised to liberate Libya from Western colonialism became the worst colonizer of all, enslaving his own people to his paranoid delusions and megalomaniacal fantasies. Gaddafi died in a culvert in October 2011, but his shadows remain. Libya fractured into warring factions. The oil still flows, but the profits disappear into offshore accounts.
Families still search for Abu Salim graves that may never be found.
The $200 billion he stole remains frozen in international banks, while Libyan children lack basic healthcare and education. His chemical weapons were destroyed, but his techniques for systematic oppression live on in the playbooks of dictators worldwide. He didn't just break Libya, he perfected the art of making atrocities disappear while the world watched. Every hidden massacre, every buried crime, every silenced witness was a lesson in how far evil can spread when it wears revolutionary clothes and controls the oil supply. The tent is gone, the gold is tarnished, but the questions remain. How many monsters are we calling allies today? How many handshakes are we watching right now? How many Gaddafis are we creating with our silence? If a man can murder 1,270 prisoners in a single day and rule for 15 more years, what's stopping the next tyrant from trying to beat his record?